I'm extremely honored and privileged to be here, and especially amongst such an illustrious group of people, and to speak on one of these principles, absolute unselfishness, and all the principles of Initiative to Change, the 4 principles, deeply resonate with me, and not just with me, but a great teacher within the Hindu tradition, and particularly the tradition that I follow, called Swami Prabhupada, who was probably the most prominent exponent of Hinduism in the 1960s and 70s around the world. He himself, very early on, I think in the 1920s and 1930s, himself took inspiration from the moral rearming movement, and he commented on this. And one of his comments was, these principles are how universally applicable they are. Primary responsibility for all living beings is that which reawakens love within their heart. And that action itself must be unmotivated and uninterrupted. So I was thinking about absolute unselfishness in this particular verse. And so this book goes on to explain that actually selflessness, within our tradition, Bhakti, the pinnacle, the highest position that one can reach is to consider oneself an absolute servant of everyone else. Which in this day and age is kind of the opposite of what we think. I'm the master of everything else and everyone else is there to serve me. But within our tradition, what's considered the topmost is someone who understands that I am here to serve everyone and everything. And so it's explained that this is actually the inherent nature of the living being. This isn't a foreign philosophy. This isn't something you have to put in to someone. And that small act of kindness from my wife made me remember that years of monastic training, kind of forgotten. But within that act, I remembered, this is what we're meant to be doing. This is our actual nature. And our philosophy goes on to teach us that actually what happens is that within the world we become conditioned. And through that conditioning, what awakens is a false sense of identity, what we call the false ego. And this false ego makes me think I'm something that I'm not. And when that happens, that's when we kind of lose touch with the fact that I'm just selflessly here to serve others. And so, whether you're selfish or you're selfless or unselfish, as it's put, the key within all of that is the self. To understand who is the true self. And the Bhagavad Gita, how many of you have heard of the Bhagavad Gita before? Most of you, but the Bhagavad Gita is a primary text within Hinduism and is considered a book that encapsulates the complete philosophy of Hinduism. And all other books kind of extrapolate from that, even though they were written, even some of them before, the condensed essence is there within the Bhagavad Gita. And it's a conversation that takes place between a great warrior, a great soldier, called Arjuna, and his friend Krishna. Krishna is a name that we give God, or that is given to us, that describes God. And in Sanskrit, Krishna means the all-attractive. In Sanskrit, names that are given to people, they encompass the qualities that person has. So God, if he does exist, and I believe he does, I've given quite a few years of my life to that belief, he must be all-attractive. Everything about that which is divine is attractive, and therefore this name Krishna is given in the Sanskrit language. So this conversation is taking place on a battlefield. And what happens in this conversation is Arjuna, the main character within the Bhagavad Gita, who's fought many battles. I mean, he's the most celebrated warrior. I mean, there's books that celebrate not just him, but he's an archer. So there's these poems that describe his bow. And there's people who worship his bow. So if they're worshipping his bow, imagine how much they must consider him to be elevated in this field. But he's also deeply spiritual. But he's about to fight the battle of his life. And he loses his sense of self. He essentially has an existential crisis in the middle of this battlefield. And he freezes and he doesn't want to fight. And he gives so many reasons for this. And his friend Krishna, who's just listening to him, he begins by describing the reason that you're feeling this way. First, actually, he says to him, this is the greatest act of selfishness, for you to run away from this battle, to not fight, not to stand for what is right, but to be passive and let kind of we can say in modern terms, evil or darkness take over. That is the biggest act of selfishness, because it may be good for you, but what about everyone else who will suffer because you left? So rather than becoming inactive, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, you act, but act in the highest benefit for everyone, without causing undue or unnecessary harm to anyone. You act, but act with complete detachment from the result of your action. You act because it's the right thing to do. And for me, this is unselfishness. When we realize that we're connected, and we act not because it's just for me and my benefit, because it benefits the greater good. That within the Hindu perspective is considered the essence of reconnecting to your true self. But a nuanced point that my own mind extrapolated from this. That unselfishness also doesn't mean to neglect oneself. Because if I understand myself to be connected to the greater self, then that's also a disservice. To neglect myself is also a disservice. Because I've been given an instrument, the body or the mind, or I have been given skills, I've been given ability. And what I've been given is also mine to give to others. Now if I neglect that, I think of Mother Teresa, for example. I mean, if you talk about selflessness, such a selfless person, slums of Calcutta. But if she neglected herself, if she herself became sick or didn't eat and kind of withered away, she may have done some nice things for a few years, but really, her selflessness is also taking care of herself. So similarly, a mother. In our tradition also we use the example of a mother as a purest example of love. Because at least I can say for my mother, I didn't really give much back, but she, unconditionally, the love was still there. I mean, how many of you had children? A few had children. I've been around some children, I don't have any of my own. I mean, they're nice for a few hours, but after that, changing what we in America call diapers and in England we call nappies, to change nappies and to lose sleep. And I remember I was with a friend of mine who had a baby when his baby was first born, and he was changing his diaper, and the baby relieved himself on him, and he found it the greatest sense of joy. I was sitting there thinking, hold on, maybe I'm glad I'm a monk right now. But there's such a selfless act, and the joy that one gets through those selfless acts. In my own experience, when I've acted in a way that's benefited me, I may have got some pleasure out of it, undeniably, there may have been something in it. When I've acted for the benefit of someone else, without any, I don't want anything back in return, that joy goes so much deeper. Because we can be unselfish to certain degrees also. And it goes back to identity. If I identify myself with a certain group, I'm a Hindu, or I'm a man, whatever it may be, I can be selfless to my own group. I can be unselfish in my own little group. But what about everyone else? And we see this in the world today, unfortunately. This is one of the biggest reasons of conflict, is that I'm so focused on serving those who are relevant to me that I neglect everyone else. Or even worse, I go so far as to harm others who are not part of my group. And interestingly, Prabhupada, who I mentioned in the beginning of this, he wrote this essay once. And this essay described this inherent nature of being selfless within the world. And he explained that there's selfishness that is very close to us, that I'm selfish when it comes to me. But he also termed this phrase extended selfishness. That my family, or my religion, my race, my set, and I'll serve those, but everyone else, forget about it. And what he said is this is just as selfish as someone who cares about only themselves. Again, because the interconnectivity with everyone. So this term, absolute unselfishness, I think is so beautifully put. Because truly to be unselfish, it has to go beyond those who are just relevant to me. It has to reach everyone. We have to see that. And that's what the Hindu tradition teaches. Again, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a very beautiful verse in which Krishna says to Arjuna, so if you act in this way, if you act on the spiritual platform, understanding you're a spirit and everything else and everyone else is connected to that same divinity, he said you will see everyone with equal vision, whether they're a priest or whether there's someone sweeping the street, whether they're a dog or whether they're whether it's a plant. If you really have that spiritual vision, you will see everything with equality. And when you see everything with equality, then you will serve everything with equality. And just to finish, and open up for some reflections and discussions or comments or corrections, chastisements, whatever it may be. The real essence of our tradition of bhakti, what it teaches us, is that ritual, prayer, scripture, spiritual practice, all of these things are simply there to reawaken this dormant love that's within our heart. And to awakening of that love finds its essence in relationship. Because I can love this glass, and it's great, but real love means reciprocation. It means relationship. And he goes on further to explain that relationship, a loving relationship, is one in which one is serving. I'm here to serve. Because I may love someone, but I can also love selfishly. But to serve also means to please. And so in its end, Krishna explains at the end of the Gita, that if you come to that point where you can love everyone and love everything, then it's not difficult to be selfless. It's not difficult to be unselfish. It's actually the natural condition that you'll come to. You don't have to add anything into your heart. You have to rather take away. And what do you take away? Take away the sense of pride or arrogance or feeling that you're entitled to anything. Because we are. But if we adopt the mentality, I am here to serve you, I'm here to serve everyone else. And if everyone adopted this mentality, you would have a world that was extremely loving and no one's need was being neglected. And I serve myself in as much as it helps me serve others. Not that I adopt an exploitative mentality where I serve myself at the expense of others. No, I serve myself in order to allow me to serve others. And so from our tradition, touching on it from a very general perspective, that's how we would approach absolute unselfishness. So I hope that resonated somewhat. And so absolute, we talk absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness, absolute love, absolute purity. Absolute is a high benchmark, but it's achievable. It's achievable because the human spirit, the most beautiful thing about it is that it can continually strive for that.